Hello, Gay Milwaukee family. On today's episode, we have Angel, and your last name isn't Flores anymore, is it? I know you got
Um,
married.
yes,
Okay.
it's a long story, but we both have kept the name Belau.
Yes.
Belau. It's my husband's last name.
All right. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about mental health because that's a topic that, as we both know, has many stigmas. And you recently did a discussion on this recently. And I thought it was just an amazing topic. Matter of fact, I've also done one too. So I just thought this was perfect that we both are on the same plane. And um, before we get into it, I just want to say neither of us are doctors. This is personal experiences. And at the end of the day, that's important and valid. But at the same time, don't take what we say as like medical professionals. So bear that in mind.
I'm here to break the stigmas when it comes to mental health because I've lived through this my entire life. And from, being born in the 90s till now, I think there's still a big stigma that needs to be kind of unraveled and be almost normalized to talk about these sort of issues.
Yeah, yeah. I feel we're living in a society where everybody has something to a degree. And I know that sounds like a general blanket statement of sorts, but it's become so prevalent, and I feel like our lives have become so much more complicated and layered just due to the just rise of how fastly the world's growing and evolving, and everyone's updating. And I feel like we're growing at a pace that people aren't keeping up at.
That's why the self-reflection is also healthy to do it with someone else as well. So you're not just lost within your head.
Yeah, going back to the stigmas and such, um, you've been pretty public about this. What are some of the ones you faced on your journey?
Stigmas that I deal with is judgment, either being called messy
Yeah.
or people not quite grasping why is this person who's been showing, a lot of growth also shows these moments of extreme vulnerability. While I'm here to teach people that I myself am axis 1 bipolar with anxiety disorder as well as insomnia disorder, the sleep disorder, and very strong PTSD where it affects my dreams and as well my waking life.
You got to talk to me. What were some of the hardest points with having this and the low points of this? Because, a lot of people just at first word of that just thinks it's just, there's a lot that comes with that when you hear it. And what are people missing? What are people not seeing?
First off, I would like to start off with bipolar disorder.
Hmm.
Just, I think this whole idea of the mood switching off the snap of a finger kind of thing is a bit false. You see it normalized in culture where people are saying, oh, I'm bipolar, that's why I'm snapping. Or that needs to kind of a little bit stop because that's not what bipolar is. Some of the huge stigmas I've dealt with are losing relationships, either family not understanding, friends, and unfortunately, when I am at my extreme lows or at a manic state, because that's what happens when you have Axis 1, it kind of reveals to you um, forcefully who really wants to stick around and who doesn't. Because it's not a very pretty picture and not everyone is able to either understand or even have the patience to deal with that.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that? Because I feel the reason I ask that is because for me and just any of the things I've gone through, having a support system in moments like that is extremely important. What are your thoughts?
Right. And I am so grateful myself that I have the support system I have right now because if not, I could be a lot worse with the condition that I do have. So first and foremost, like you have to have a strong foundation. Dealing with this affliction and say you have a very unstable um, foundation and support system, then at that moment in time, I would suggest that you do keep up with your therapy and you do keep up with your psychiatry because that is your support system.
Mm,
Unfortunately, not all of us are privileged to have that.
mm,
And of course, that's another issue at hand and at play. But to focus back on just to what I have dealt with in my life is constant renewal of myself. I'm constantly being reminded of who I am and also who is really out there. And it's a very painful, struggling process. It hurts, but at the same time, it's an amazing kind of forced growth that I'm going through.
Mm. Let's bring up another thing. I was recently on a discussion on another person's project who talked about mental health, and one of the things that came up was how just we don't think about the way we talk about it. Like when you say, "Oh, the weather's so bipolar," or "I missed my show, I'm depressed." Do those things kind of like make you feel like it devalues you? Because I've heard that come up before.
Yeah, in a sense, yes. It depends on who it's coming from. If it's within, with anything in life, if it's within your circle, you might take it like a grain of salt.
Yeah.
But when it's someone you do not know, or you're in public, or you're trying to be in a work environment, and things get brought up like that, where ups and downs are being described as bipolar, yeah, it does hurt. It does feel like a knife in the heart, and almost like you start to think to yourself, wow, so is this what people actually think of me as? That's what starts to happen.
Yeah, I feel like it's similarly to when people used to frivolously use the word like "that's so gay." It was one of those things that it gets
Sure.
attached to something so
Exactly.
carelessly that
Mhm.
it makes you kind of shrink a little bit. Like, is that
It is a
parallel?
shrinking feeling. Yeah, it's like a shrinking. It's a devaluing. It's hurtful in a sense. And the thing is that people don't realize because it has been normalized. So I get it, and from both perspectives. But yeah, I think we're heading towards an age where I think people are starting to be more aware of each other's triggers, so to
Yes.
say,
Like we could hope.
and
We could hope.
less respectful. Exactly.
I feel like a lot of this is multi-layered because, like I said, I was talking to someone else about this, and this is very much linked to not only and you see this with some celebrities too in their public lives. This can be linked to like suicide. This can be linked to like um, the reason certain things fall apart, and just the symptoms and the outcomes seem to manifest. And I feel like a lot of the times some people don't even recognize they have it. It's just there's a huge disconnect that like something's actually wrong. It's not just I'm not you know, a super angry person or someone who flies off the handle or a crazy person or just people don't get along with me. I think, and unfortunately, people don't reach that conclusion sometimes, and it takes a while.
Multi-layered. So I would say when you think of it like this, you have three factors:
Mm,
genetics.
yeah.
In life, you have your traumas and tragedies,
Yes.
and then the third part is access to mental health and your support and foundation that you have,
Hmm.
and they all tie into each other. Some people are not born with that chemical imbalance, but it's produced throughout life. Or some people are born right away with that chemical imbalance because both parents suffered from lots of mental afflictions themselves. So it is definitely one can play with the other, and they both are tied into each other, I should say.
Yeah. Do you feel that being a minority and a person in the LGBT plus community that plays a role into how this journey?
Yes, it really did. Growing up, I was born 1990 exactly,
Hmm.
and
Same.
it was a very tough time.
Yeah.
It was a tough time just because for people like myself, who, when I was younger, I wasn't able to really hide my sexuality. I wasn't really harnessing, I guess, the fact that the way I was behaving wasn't the ideal behavior of what a male should behave as. And that certainly did not help with the judgment I received throughout middle school, high school, including even elementary. I remember this lady when I was in kindergarten who was teaching me how to walk straight.
Yes.
So yeah, it all played a factor. Definitely being a gay LGBT. I'm Puerto Rican, so definitely a minority. And even though I do fall under white Puerto Rican, I'm still Puerto Rican, and it is a minority, and it all plays into it. Yes.
I feel like, and thank God, the next generation isn't going to have to go through it. Because like you said, the 90s were so surreal on so many levels. Um, how much it comes with walking straight, talking straight, posturing straight, um, even the way you glance at things. And I
Correct.
think that is so much of a kind of like a double consciousness. How you know how minorities go through that in general, but also as a gay person in that time period, especially if you're a child. I think in the younger years, um, you don't know any better. I mean, there's no way you could just say, hey, I am who I am at that age. You deal with it. That's not how it works when you're younger. You're like, oh, I must be doing something wrong. When older
Correct.
people are telling. So you feel
It
you're the
was
problem. hmm I think,
it was like that.
and while, I'm not going to say that's anyone's reason for their thing. I feel like sometimes when you have so many layers of like double conscious, that can kind of like mess with your head a bit, whether, you're depressed, bipolar, what have you. I feel like you have to switch things on and off frequently. That's,
No, you're 100% right, and I was actually going to go with that. It's just that we as humans throughout our years, we start to decompartmentalize our personalities. We start to do that because of survival. We start to realize people's reactions are either helping us or hindering us. So we want to fit that mold. But at the same time, we want to be true to ourselves. And I
yeah,
think that's part of my sickness of where I was almost so strong to decompartmentalize what was okay, what wasn't, definitely played a huge role on why my major depression turned into border personality disorder. That's the beginning of you splitting two parts of yourselves in your own mind.
yeah.
And that's the beginning of it.
I'll even say, even as a man, I think the fact that it's in American society tapping into like feminine emotions, like crying, saying I love you, hugging, um, being held, those are things that are looked down upon when men in our society do it. There's this still weird disconnect with the feminine and masculine in our communities sometimes. Even, I have to say it, and I know I'm going to put our community on blast, but even sometimes in the gay community, people get,
Sadly, it's
yeah, it can still be stigmatized and judgmental, and people categorize us depending on how feminine we are, how masculine we are we macho enough, and that's another layer to the mind. We're gonna beep it out,
exactly.
but
And we do that to ourselves too. You know,
yeah,
we do that to ourselves when we go home at the end of the day and no one's around and we really start to think about and reflect on just the day in general or the past 5 years is what can I do better to either be more straight? What can I do better to be more myself?
yeah,
And that's the issue
yeah,
because when you start to split up your personalities like that, you're not being your true self all the way.
yeah.
Simple as that.
And I feel, while I'm no expert on things, I feel if more of that was handled better, we wouldn't
Yes.
reach these conclusions we're at, in our later lives. I feel like there's so much stuff that a lot of people with mental health issues, it's because their formative years, I personally, from my experiences, what I've seen, it wasn't handled well. I think a lot of abuse at a young age. I think, particularly raping at younger ages, or just any age. It doesn't have to be at a young age, but just the people I've spoken to, that followed them, and it really kind of shaped how they interact and how they go about things. Like you said, trauma.
Exactly. Something that a lot of people forget is that a child mind is always developing.
Yes.
And it's till, the later years of your life, like 20s, that I'm not 100% sure on when the mind starts to stop developing.
I feel like for me, 30. There was a lot that happened between 20 and 30.
Right. And unfortunately, those tragedies and traumas, sexual abuse, um, play a huge role in your brain creating its own survival instinct.
Yeah.
And sometimes that survival instinct could be pure anxiety because that's what your brain learned, or pure anger and destructiveness because that's what you learned. And it's important to not become a product of the abuse that you've endured.
Yeah. And it's so weird because like I talked about with you earlier, we're in this like new era where like you can just turn on your phone and like stare at things long enough and it can just like these levels of depression, like where you go on your Instagram, you see like these perfect looking people nonstop, or you go on Facebook and you see the perfect lives of everybody they should are showing. And even that, I know it's small in comparison to some of this, but I feel like it all adds fuel to the fire, and those are just everyday simple things we see.
Right. We're heading into a stage in life where before the media, they were magazines,
Yeah.
whether it be Vogue, whatnot. And I think what happened to a lot of young boys and girls, we started to look into that in the 90s and early, like late 80s, magazines. Well, now we have social media. And the same exact thing that used to happen to the kids when, we looked at magazines is happening now, but with Facebook, Instagram, and etc. The
Yeah.
difference is that we're not looking at just entertainers anymore. We're starting to look at each other as perfectionists.
Hmm.
But we're not realizing sometimes that what we're putting out there can be sometimes viewed as just an illusion rather than
Yes.
the actual human being as a whole.
And that's the crazy part about it, because I feel like we're conscious enough to know this, but I feel like a lot of the times we just don't think that extra mile ahead. And there's so much of us. We just think at the incomplete picture. And I feel like, for example, when you're seeing someone's perfect life on Facebook, or you see politics and all these things that can add different layers to triggerings and stuff you see online or in day-to-day society or what have you, um, we kind of forget about, we kind of can clap sometimes. I feel like, or if someone, is homophobic or whatever, all these things kind of affect our value. And it feels like, I think, from my experiences, I just feel like a lot of people's mental conditions started with those collapses of, you know, and it's easy to put your value and compare yourself and feel like you have to stand up and fight every fight, and, whatever thing is being channeled to
Sure.
you that day on TV or social media or when you step out the door or,
And that's where I say you have to pick and choose your battles,
Mhm.
because is that battle online really going to serve purpose?
Yeah,
And are you operating through love?
yeah,
Those things. Because they really will feed into your energy as a human being, especially being a sensitive who has issues with these afflictions. It can be a very important decision, almost life-saving, if you choose to take a step back and just either keep scrolling or if you want to choose that battle, go ahead, but be prepared for the consequences.
I also, on top of that note, you said some of these conditions are also genetics. One of them I think that is the most common is addictions, from what I've
Right.
seen. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that when it comes to...
Addiction, yes. It's a form of self-medicating at the end of the day. When you don't have access, and maybe you still do have access to healthcare, it's easier to take a drink or a smoke or maybe do heroin if that was your vice than it is to take one medication and do your coping skills and live a healthier, easier life. I think it comes down to um, where you are with your addiction process, because many people that do suffer from mental affliction also normally have an addictive personality.
And
It
that's
kind of goes hand in hand.
And that's the same thing. What we talked about earlier, people don't think the extra mile. I think when you hear of addiction or alcoholics, you think of this person that purposely makes these choices where they just, and, I think we don't think that extra mile. That is a level, an element of self-medicating to kind of, I don't want to say release or whatever, or name what people's reasons are for doing it. I think everyone has their own reasons why they
Correct.
drink, do drugs, why they, sometimes we eat a lot excessively, or, I deserve this
Exactly.
cake today, or we all have our
Oh
different
yeah.
vice or version. Yeah.
Everyone has their vice. Everyone does. I mean, you could be a workaholic just to try to pump out all that anger.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes in many ways.
Or
Yep.
abusive. Yeah. That's the same
Unfortunately,
similar
that's a form
principle.
of an addiction too, is to hurt, because I think that comes from sometimes people are so hurt that that they feel as though they just want to hurt someone else just so that they can feel what they are feeling. But that's not a way of operating through love, and it is unhealthy.
Yeah. So, on a closing note, Angel, what are some advice you just give to people that have any mental illness condition or what have you? What do you recommend?
The first thing is go seek help first. Talk to someone. I don't care who it is, a friend, family member. It does not have to be a mental professional. It could just be a friend. You have to speak up. Do not internalize this. The second thing is you are not alone. You have millions of people in this world, billions probably, I'm not sure, I'm not all that great mathematically, but you are definitely not alone. And the third thing is it's okay. Whatever has been thrown at your life, you have a choice of moving forward. You have a choice of almost, you have regrets in the past, but you don't have to have any regrets coming in the future. Take control.
Yeah. All of us have the chance to get through it, whatever we're going through, whether it's, addictions, mental illness, all the above. We're in a day and age of information and, it is going to be hard some days. And I think people forget that. I remember I was talking to a friend who telling me about a suicide experience, and they said after they survived, everyone's like, oh, you're getting through this. It's great. It's just like, no, you still have to find a way to live with this.
And that's the stigma about it. It's not a one-size-fits-all. There is not a 100% solution yet. It's always a work in progress. Again, I've had these issues since I was 11. I'm 30 now. I'll be 31 in May. This is not going to go away. This can either de-evolve if I let it, or have it evolve even more if I'm not monitoring it and seeking my help and being compliant with some of my medications that I do know I need.
If we had all the answers, we wouldn't be having this ongoing discussion.
Right.
And but I am glad we're having this discussion though, because I think we sometimes need that daily reminder. This is a real thing, and we just got to sometimes keep talking about it so we don't have to kind of we're not at the level of it where it needs to, you know what I mean? It's something that's not fully digested yet.
Some of us have insulin for diabetic reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us have high blood pressure medications because of our blood pressure. Mm-hmm. The same goes for the mind.
And that's going to wrap up our episode for today. And Angel, come back anytime, okay?
I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere.
All right. That's our episode, and we are signing out.
All right. Thank you so much. Love you so much. Bye-bye.